Hello! Part 2 of the unexpected bumps in the road when publishing your own book. Quite a number of these are also bumps in the road for any author. There's a sort of naive simplicity about fantasizing about having your books on the shelves. This seems to me to be akin to my horror that travelling involved taking my feet with me and how many times they would hurt. Last week, I referred to the problem of retaining the author's voice that had meant that I needed to pull out of the arrangement that was hatching with a proper publisher. In the mix was the fact that I have a lot of experience with report layout and had also designed our book on the lichens of Jersey. This was launched 2 months after my grandfather's book. This made me a tad cocky about how we could progress. That cockiness didn't last very long, as it got eroded by the list of, "Oh, I need to think about this," moments that came thick and fast during the pre- and post-publication months. I'm not sure that these are in any particular order. They're in the order that I usually write them down. Number 20 should not be number 20, but it always is. Hopefully I will have been able to do a timestamp list down below, but in case I've not done it yet by the time you find this video, it's the when to send out review copies of your book. This needs to be done well before the date of publication and the launch. Slapping my own wrists, I hope I will get the point across that it's important to think ahead, which I did not, and have always struggled to remember to do. Woven into this quick romp through complicated topics are some updates built on experience since the first book, which might clarify some of it. It's going to be a long one, sorry. Sort of sorry. Number 1, choosing the cover and book title. This first book was my beloved grandfather's autobiography, honouring a promise my father made to him and I in turn made to my father. It is possible that some of my decisions were clouded by the familial relationship, although nobody has actually said this to me. The working title my grandfather had was "It's Warmer Down Below." Somewhere in the pages of the book he refers to his early days working as a tunnelling engineer, and how he realised this truth, now employed by myriad hobbit houses and heat pump installations. In the 1920s there was also an exhibition of that name to promote the warmth of underground tunnels in London in the winter. I had no reason to quibble about the title, but adding the autobiography of Sir Harold Harding 1900 to 1986 doesn't really explain what it's about 100 years later. He was a sought-after TV pundit in his day, but there's only one Pathé reel of him talking, and his clipped tones sound weird to even my ears now. I'm sure he didn't actually speak like that to us. Anyway, it should be more explanatory as a subtitle looked at from here. With the title comes the cover design, conceptually anyway. I know a number of people who start designing their cover before they've even written the book, which is most probably going to be an issue later, but it's instinct. I did do that for my little garden wildlife book, but people like that one at least. Again, know your audience is a good idea. My choice of cover is different, but maybe too much so. The trouble is, it's the first tapestry that my grandfather did to keep from getting bored while my grandmother knitted all of us her characteristic jumpers. And the seat is still in the hall. Does that image speak clearly enough to the civil engineer students and aficionados who are the target audience? Should it be a tunnel or a landslide with yellow jackets next to it instead? I don't know, but suspect that it should have been. Hey-ho. It's a civil engineering tapestry done by a passionate civil engineer who was a fan of Ronnie Barker's, so my subtext was how human he was and how much chance of comedy there is in his pages. But I don't live in a parallel universe. Number 2, editing properly. While the book was beautifully written with fabulous text, nuggets and twists of prose, there were things to resolve. I am beyond grateful to live in an era when the cutting and pasting is done digitally. When I think back to my university essays, which were shortly before the desktop computer became such a brilliant tool, the idea of resolving problems with a typescript and some scissors with no chance to do a quick search for keywords adds to that gratitude. Some chapters had to be amalgamated or split, so that the themes within them are unravelled away from the huh moments. When you are close to a book, it can be hard to step far enough back to do that restructuring, and it can be really helpful to have others add in their comments. For example, my sister-in-law was able to make some very good suggestions, and in particular to prompt me to do some mini biographies as a sort of appendix, stripping the short life stories he had woven into the text that were unsettling if not confusing. Number 3. Proofing again and again. Proofreading is a mega bugbear of all authors. I knew from working on reports and documents how many I's and goes through it takes to nibble at the typos therein. But a 60-page report is rather different to a 300-page book. I've been over the book so many times, both for the print and the later ebook version, and keep finding small errors. But I'm also finding more and more in traditionally published books, missed words, misspelled words, or downright wrong words. We all do it. For reports, the idea was 4 different pairs of eyes would always find something, and yep, that has always been true. It still hurts to find them after the first couple of goes through, though. I'm not sure laptops help people either. I use a separate keyboard because my thumb thwacking the mousepad moves the cursor to somewhere unknown, usually at a critical moment. Number 4. Copyright and fact-checking. I may be the daughter and granddaughter of civil engineers, but as I am not one myself, I sought the support and guidance of my brother's godfather, who had also been a protégé of the author. He was really kind, although we both missed an arch which was actually a conduit, complete with an upside-down bucket, kindly pointed out later by a reader. What I soon realised at this stage was that my wonderful, insightful and knowledgeable grandfather had mangled almost every place name he had identified in his writing. Some of this was to do with the era in which he wrote, but mostly it was some sort of not quite dyslexia, I think. He had done special English lessons at school, something to do with being a scientist but communication being crucial, so maybe his spelling had been beaten into him for grammatical words, I don't know, but again, thank you, computers and the internet. Traditional publishers employ fact-checkers who are more of the blissful pedants it takes experience to appreciate the value of. As an aside, one of those fact-checkers working on a catalogue of paintings touring America that my great-grandfather had done identified that he had actually been born a year before all the books in the family believed him to have been. That set a cat roaming among the art pigeons. Number 5. Indexing. Indexing is a non-fiction issue, although maybe some of Tolkien's work has been indexed, I'm not sure. Anyway, it is a slog. To my embarrassed horror, I omitted to do the name-dropper of the Duke of Edinburgh, although sending him a copy, as he had been on many committees with my grandfather and had thanked him warmly for his earlier book, Just About Tunnelling. I use InDesign for book layout and had learned a lot about indexing the lichens, but it is hard work to keep alert to, even with the tools available. As a bit of an index snob, I had to go for it, but then had to work out how to structure it. For the later ebook, I bailed on getting the page numbering to replicate. Sorry, ebook readers. Number 6. Sponsorship confirmed. When the decision came to do the book under the Tillier Publishing UK name, the pressure to contact multiple potential sponsors abated. The British Tunnelling Society chairman were keen to support a book that explained to the members more about their founding chairman, and I was invited to speak in the interim of a prize-giving evening on the book and its contents. After some negotiations between the officers, they made me a supportive offer, and with additional support from some family members, it was possible to arrange for a decent print run. I'm so grateful for this. Not all books get this support, and it was in his honour. This meant a lot to all of us. Number 7. Blurbs. Blurbs are arguably the second worst thing to get sorted once the logistics of production are resolved. In a recent poll done by friends, the single worst thing was marketing. That's a nightmare on stratospheric levels. Anyway, a meaningful blurb is another source of stress. It needs to be brief, engaging, Say something to entice a reader, long enough to work for those who want more detail without boring the pants off those who don't. It's like a conceptual version of that game people used to play with their mat and contortions as they had to put their feet on different colours, but basically they'd all end up in an embarrassed heap giggling manically. Oh yes, the ego has to be in the background, but it has to sell the book to the potential reader. This is where having a cover that does half the storytelling is a good idea. Number 8. ISBN and Nielsen. Facebook groups are awash with people asking how to get an ISBN. The number's on the back of a book that in longhand is called the International Standard Book Number. Different agencies in each country are responsible for allocating the numbers, but they can be bought in a number of different ways. The print-on-demand businesses offer ISBNs, but these are owned by them and could lead to problems later on. Since I was doing a print run, I didn't have to navigate that decision, as it wasn't available. It was still profoundly confusing, but in the UK, Nielsen are actually extremely helpful when you speak to them, which is the advice I've always given the Facebook folk. It is so much simpler when the staff are helpful in an organisation to get the information from the people who actually do know what they're talking about, and they are at Nielsen. However well informed of us, what are using them might think we are. It is way speedier to sort it all out at the root. Filling in the details on their forms turned out to be picky about the internet browser. That was frustrating to keep attempting to resolve until they admitted to that little surprise. A browser is not just any old browser. Number 9. Sourcing a printer. Doing a print run seemed like a good plan given the sponsorship could support it. The reason why print on demand has become so popular is to avoid the need for holding stock and having upfront bills to pay on the gamble that the money will be repaid through sales at better margins. I'm still sniffy about print on demand and the dubious quality of printing, but all my books to date have been image heavy, which print on demand is challenged over. I do now have a printer that is better, but that is now not then. I scoured the London Book Fair to check on different print options, but the big companies seemed too aloof. Jersey had opted for a short-run printer for the lichens of Jersey, and the pre-publication copies seemed better than the print-on-demand wares, so I went with them for the warmer down-below copies. After that successful print run, they had a staff change, so the next job they ran for me was a total disaster, but thankfully all went more or less smoothly, apart from a glitch, as they needed to be paid in advance in a particular way that I wasn't set up for. The copies arrived 2 days before the launch. Number 10. British Library and Copyright Library copies. All books with ISBNs, and all books need ISBNs, need to have at least one copy sent to the British Library. Then the follow-up from the other copyright libraries in the UK could mean a further 5 copies going to the distribution centre. With so many more books published now than even 10 years ago, as well as a ghastly website hack, I'm not sure how things are now, but again, they have always been really lovely people to talk to sort out questions, etc. Local libraries used to want a copy too, but they seem to have decided against pursuing that nowadays, unless by special arrangement. It always feels rather hard to have to sell a gift. Number 11. The launch. Where? When? Anyone who has ever heard me talk about books and publishing will know how deeply I feel about having a launch party for your book. Making decisions surrounding this can be crucial for its success. Back to the mantra of know your market. A launch that doesn't engage your niche won't give you the buzz that you need for the battle with marketing to come. It's a form of christening or gender reveal or whatever your preferred analogy to do with babies might be. For me, given who the book was by, I had a hope that I could pull off with some negotiations. But, as it turned out, the offer was made to me before I could ask. The Institution of Civil Engineers is based in George Street in central London, in a superb and beautiful building with a magnificent library. I was offered the chance to do the launch in the library, as my grandfather was a past president as well as all his other ICE activities. When? became the face there. The best time for the niche audience was to tie it into one of the British Tunnelling Society Thursday meetings, but there was only a single date that the library was free of events that would make it possible. September the 17th, 2015. The books arrived here from the printers on the 15th. I was exceptionally stressed, that's for sure. Number 12. Who to invite. As with all parties, the guest list is important. A mixture of family and friends that you believe will get on, especially with a guest of honour, which is effectively what your book is. You want an atmosphere of positivity if you can pull it off. I suppose if you're in a venue that isn't normally pulling people in, there's more incentive to send out some bespoke invites. I don't know, it's a tough one to call. The two best launches we have had have been in venues with invites sent out to members and friends of the organisation. I do remember a brilliant book launch by a friend in Daunt's in London, but I think London has a better attitude or maybe wider catchment. Anyway, this book had a very diverse list of invitees that included the British Tunnelling Society members, many members of my family, neighbours, colleagues, contacts within civil engineering and civil engineering press. There was a great buzz and I had done a small exhibition to go with it. Number 13. What to give them? Tea or wine? I seem to remember that if we had supplied wine there might have been some insurance issues, so it was simplest to go for teas and coffees. All the library tables had been moved back, so there was no risk of damage to books. I was so flustered that I quickly passed my coffee cup to my brother to stow somewhere safely. I refound it later undrunk behind the screens. Simon was busy taking photographs as a record, but the lighting upset his camera, so they've always had to be photoshopped. He was almost as flustered as I was. The launch was late for tea, but early for wine, so tea was easiest, the best option. Number 14. Numbers to allow for biscuits and books. I actually don't remember if we ended up with biscuits. That day was almost as much a blur as my wedding day, but I do remember that we had battled our way across the street in heavy rain with a trolley and collapsing boxes of books. London and parking. I had bundled the books into paper bundles to make them more manageable, but arrived in a fluster with them cascading everywhere, much to the amusement of the porters, one of whom did come to my rescue. It was unbelievable to get upstairs in the lift and discover no books had been harmed. We took 50 and sold just over half of those. For about 90 minutes, my hand was getting filled with notes or IOUs from friends and known colleagues. Please factor in fluster to your planning as well as the chats with people you really want to talk to where you're actually supposed to be doing something else. For the disastrous launch of my little book, I sold one copy and gave away another. The recipient of that on a tombola came rushing round to tell me she was delighted with the book. It was the prize she had really wanted. It was just the wrong venue for a launch, as it was piggybacking on another event which I do not recommend anyone even contemplates. Well, unless it's a book festival, I suppose. Number 15. How long to plan it for? What time of day? This is an interesting one, as I actually had no choice in the matter. Back to the know your audience mantra, though. If you want your audience to be relaxed and positive thinking, early starts don't feel like a useful plan unless it's a breakfast recipe book. Late evenings, all they'll want to do is sup on wine and chit-chat. If you're in a building that has set hours, that will dictate what you can pull off. I'm anticipating that my next launch will be in our church in the early afternoon, so that people have time to travel back and forth. But it really does depend on who is coming. Number 16. Media notifications. I'll refer you forwards to review copies at number 20 here as well. Media attention is really worth contemplating if you can manage it. Maybe to announce the launch or to have a piece written on the book in advance of the launch. Mostly you need to write that yourself. I had some assistance with the British Tunnelling Society, as the tunnelling media attend the meetings more often than not. I was also donating money to the institution's benevolent fund, so they arranged for some press help through their contacts. Local press are hungry for pieces that are engaging or interesting, but reaching out beforehand is a good plan. And you need to do your own photographs. Number 17. Selling it. This is where most of us do a lot of frustrated swearing. I'm still utterly perplexed about how to pull this off, in spite of all the bravado in this video. Some mistakes are so subtle, but also the marketplace is utterly saturated with books with higher profiles. Naked promotions work for some books, but I'm not sure my grandmother would cope in her spirit if I went in for anything along those lines to promote Warmer Down Below. Developing a thick skin seems to work for others, but reaching the right eyes is a sort of luck zeitgeist that can be utterly bewildering. Just boring everyone with "buy my book" is not supposed to work, although so many authors do that, and of course what else are you thinking of all the time? Number 18, website. This will seeg speedily into 19 because it turned into a big facer. I've had websites I've built for years using raw code and then fancy software, so part of my "it's okay, I know what I'm doing" gung-ho naivety again took a hit. Since the launch had been so tight, I thought it would be okay to put the book on an existing website, just slipping in the payment details, and that would be that. Of course not. Number 19, e-commerce complexities. So, 24 hours after the launch, I was websiteless, as it turned out that A, normal websites aren't enabled for payment, and B, my ISP didn't have servers that ran that sort of site. I'm beyond grateful to my brother and his wife that for a few months they were able to host the book on their payment-enabled website, which, with a bizarre twist of fate, is a Stitchcraft site, so the book's cover had some crossover there at least. Meanwhile, I was in a stress panic. I had been hearing for years about how important it is to own your own domain name and content, which for me made Shopify and other hosted sites like them something that I was opposed to. I scoured the internet looking for clues as to how I could get out of my unexpected fix. I bought a fat and incomprehensible book on coding for e-commerce, hoping that maybe I could write my own code. Can't remember who was going to host that, but it felt like it would take a long time to get up and running. This was 2015, and it was a time when I was still active in the Federation of Small Businesses. A couple of years later, I wouldn't have had that next bit of serendipity that was very like the Atacama Desert introduction to sponsorship that I mentioned last week. I went to a meeting and bemoaned the fact that it was so difficult to sort out a simple small website to a lady who was speaking on blocks for small business owners. The next day, I got a phone call from her. Literally that morning, she had been to another event and met a girl who worked for Create in Brighton, who have a range of different website hosting opportunities where you build your own look and they give access to secure and safe payment portals for reasonable sums. I have been with Create almost to the day we had that phone conversation, and it has been an incredibly positive experience. Suddenly the problem was solved. I have a little book I bought years ago called Luck, and one of the nuggets I gleaned from it was how valuable chattering at supermarket checkouts can be. Not that I've yet got that particular scenario paying off, but definitely that evening queuing for our coach solved a monster problem. On the 18th of December 2015, the Tilia Publishing UK went live to a fanfare of crickets, because of course nobody had the slightest interest so close to Christmas. There's a moral lurking there. Plan ahead. But then again, websites take time to mature, so maybe it was better it was a low-key event. At least it was off my to-do list before Christmas, I suppose. Number 20. Review copies. When? Review copies of your book are a necessary expense. I've actually not got this one sorted yet. Maybe that's the psychology behind my putting it last on this list. I did the main list 8 years ago. I'm a voracious reader of book reviews in magazines and have bought a number as a result, but the only source of media-inspired purchasing of Warmer Down Below that I can correlate was a warm piece done by the Benevolent Fund about the book and my contributions to them based on a small proportion of the sale price. There have been many warm and enthusiastic reviews from delighted and knowledgeable readers, but no sales have come from any of them. Simon's book Is No Problem, first edition, had a brilliant review from an experienced tour leader, yet that drove no sales either. So my attitude is a bit less enthusiastic than many of my author friends who keep asking their readers to leave them reviews. But, getting to the point, reviews need to come out at the time of the launch. This means the copies need to go off with enough time for the reviewer to A. read the book, but, more importantly, B. read all the books they're reviewing first. This is why sending the review copies off after the launch misses a big opportunity. Okie doke! Huge thanks for sticking with me to the end. There's a lot covered in this video, and hopefully some of the insights gained from experience will highlight some things that you've maybe not thought of, or for experienced authors maybe have had shared and similar experiences provoking wry grins. It'd be great to have any thoughts in the comments below, triggered memories, alternative scenarios, etc. Today is Remembrance Day, so here are some poppies to commemorate all those humans and animals that have fallen or stumbled in conflicts near or far. Courage is something about working through fear, not so much about being fearless. It is also about working together in some ways. I found it sobering how many DFC medals were given to the civil engineers who became tunnellers as I pulled together the mini biographies for Warmer Down Below. Have a good week. All the best. Thank you.